The second subject we'd like to talk about is our view with regard to the start of the Great Tribulation, with the destruction of Babylon the Great. When we look through the scriptures, in Revelation chapter 16, what does it tell us? That the waters would gradually dry up. Yes, churches are losing support in some countries. For example, Europe. It wasn't that long ago that most nations in Europe were very religious. But now people are turning their backs on religion. But at the same time, when we look at Africa and South America, we see that religion still has a strong influence. So now, what could be that little voice in our mind saying, well, yeah, we see it's going in the right direction, but maybe not just yet. We've got a little bit more time left. But again, we need to remember what the scriptures tell us. And if you'd turn with me this time, please, to Revelation chapter 17, this is one of the chapters that describes the destruction of false religion, or in other words, when the Great Tribulation starts. So let's read Revelation 17 and verse 17, and note, please, what it tells us. For God put it into their hearts to carry out his thought, yes, to carry out their one thought by giving their kingdom to the wild beast until the words of God will have been accomplished. Now, what is this one thought? Well, up to now, we've said the one thought is their desire to turn on false religion. And we can understand that because the context is talking about the destruction of false religion. But you see, if you look back at that verse, what is the one thought? Now, this means we have to adjust our understanding, another change. What does it say? The one thought refers to the nations being willing to hand over power, their political power, to the scarlet-colored wild beast, the United Nations.
Isn't it amazing how easy it is for the governing body to arrive at new light nowadays? All they need to do is read the Bible in context, and suddenly they can unlock this treasure trove of new understandings, of adjustments in their understandings regarding Bible prophecy. Seriously, how are we supposed to respect this? How are we supposed to look at the governing body and see God's channel of communication? It's not a very efficient channel, is it? So it's taken all the way up to 2024 for them to come to a new understanding as to the one thought. It's no longer about the nations turning on Babylon the Great or false religion or essentially any religion that isn't Jehovah's Witnesses. It's now supposedly to do with the nations giving their power to, as we're going to see, the United Nations. So that's the change. That's the big deal. Geoffrey Jackson seems to be the governing body member who gets to do these big reveals, especially when it comes to Armageddon and the Great Tribulation. And this is his massive revelation for us in the 2024 annual meeting.
The 10 horns that you saw mean 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. But they do receive authority as kings for 1 hour with the wild beast. These have one thought, so they give their power and authority to the wild beast. So up to now, we've assumed these 10 kings, which represent all the political powers and governments in the world at the moment, that they did this during the last days by supporting, first of all, the League of Nations and then the United Nations. But now, what do we understand this to be, seeing we understand verse 17? Well, there will come a time when all political powers on earth, which includes many who have never been part of the seven world powers, they will see that they need to collectively pool their power by giving it to the United Nations to try and solve some of the problems in the world. And they will rule, notice, what does it say, for 1 hour, just a short period of time. So this newly empowered United Nations, from that time on, will rule collectively for a short time, but it will enable them to destroy false religion and fight against Jesus and Jehovah's people. Now, isn't that exciting?
Yeah, it's absolutely thrilling. So apologies if you do actually find this intensely boring, but I have to cover this because this is new light. This is a new understanding that they've come up with. They've now decided that when the 10 kings give over their power, they're not doing it in the past, as was the previous understanding to the League of Nations. This is all something that's going to happen in the future. It's not just about the establishment of the League of Nations and the United Nations. It's a specific giving away or ceding of sovereignty to the United Nations, so that the United Nations has the clout it needs to destroy false religion and then turn on Jehovah's Witnesses, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses believe is going to happen just before Armageddon. So it's not like a groundbreaking change. It's by no stretch one of the most remarkable bits of new light that has flashed forth from the wisdom of the governing body, but it is nonetheless worth registering and hopefully explaining for you. And ultimately, all of this is designed to increase the anticipation of Jehovah's Witnesses regarding Armageddon, to keep them on tenterhooks and in this constant state of readiness. And we're going to see that especially in Geoffrey Jackson's concluding remarks.
So what have we learned in our discussion? Well, yes, some things change gradually. But brothers and sisters, remember, there are some sudden things that are about to occur. Let's remember the two things as a reminder. First of all, the remaining anointed ones will suddenly be taken to heaven while they are still very active. The second one, Jehovah will suddenly move the nations to give their political power to the United Nations. So what's the takeaway? Don't be complacent. Don't think, oh, this is going to gradually change. No, some things won't gradually change. They will occur suddenly as acts of God. So be ready and don't be surprised by sudden change.
Geoffrey Jackson needs to be careful. I'm just going to say it. He really needs to calm down. It's not good for his health, a man of his proportions, if I can put it diplomatically, to be getting that agitated. And it is, just to be candid for a moment, quite noticeable just how much Geoffrey Jackson is yelling at his audience throughout this talk, but especially there at the end. He starts off his talk with almost a stand-up routine, talking about essentially how silly the expectations of Jehovah's Witnesses were regarding the anointed, and those were expectations that were specifically based on teachings that were given to them by the governing body at that time, due to the generation teaching, due to the belief that the generation that witnessed the events of 1914, the generation of anointed Christians, would not pass away before Armageddon. So making light of it and joking about it is itself, I would say, quite tone deaf and quite inappropriate. But he's gone from stand-up mode to just barking and yelling mode. And again, all of this seems to be intended to keep Jehovah's Witnesses in this perpetual state of readiness and tension and urgency. What he's saying effectively is, no matter what our teachings may have been in the past that might be still leading you to the assumption that the end is quite far off, we now have an explanation that makes all of these things current. We're just making a few tweaks here and there so that the book of Revelation is talking about now rather than the events of the 20th century, which is essentially what the Revelation climax, the now obsolete Revelation climax book, was all about. This new light is entirely focused on ramping up the doomsday rhetoric and keeping Jehovah's Witnesses in a constant state of readiness for the end.